Argentina, January 2025. December inflation data, announced by the government, showed a surprising 2.7%. Seems like a high number, doesn't it? However, let me tell you that a year ago, December inflation was 25.5%. How is it possible to go from such a high number to a relatively low number in just 1 year? The answer: one man standing up almost single-handedly to one of the most corrupt systems in the world.
Es decir, esta es una sociedad que está infectada de socialismo. Y lo que hay que lograr es sacar el socialismo de la cabeza de la gente, ¿sí? Y los principales promotores de estas ideas son los políticos. Al zurdo de mierda no le podés dar ni un milímetro.
¿Qué le ponés de mierda?
Porque son una mierda. O sea, si, no, pero es que si pensás distinto te van a aniquilar.
Javier Milei, futuro presidente.
Sí, zurdos hijos de puta, tiemblen. La libertad avanza. ¡Viva la libertad, carajo! ¡Vamos!
¿Tenemos audio? ¿Tenemos audio?
Vamos.
Bueno, Javier Milei es economista, pero además ha escrito un libro que viene a presentar a Tucumán hoy.
Exactamente, venimos a presentar el libro que lleva como título Política Económica Contrarreloj y hoy a las 21 horas lo vamos a estar presentando en el Sheraton.
This is the first interview that Javier Milei gave on TV. And as if destiny was written, on the right side of the background you can read the phrase Punto de Partida, starting point. But to understand how Milei came to power, we must first make a brief review of Argentine history. Don't worry, I won't bore you with a history lesson. I promise it will be brief. Argentina has great potential to become an economic power. Its natural resources, such as extensive fertile land for agriculture and livestock, as well as its abundant reserves of minerals, such as gold, silver, copper, and lithium, position it as a country with a promising future. Moreover, its Atlantic coast and the Guarani Aquifer, one of the largest freshwater reserves in the world, offer additional opportunities for economic development. Although Argentina has enormous economic potential thanks to its natural resources and privileged geographic location, its history has been marked by periods of great prosperity and others of crisis. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, Argentina was considered one of the richest nations in the world, thanks to its agro-export model based on meat and grain production. The influx of European immigrants, mainly from Italy, Spain, and Germany, contributed to its development and turned Buenos Aires into a cosmopolitan city, known as the Paris of South America. The quality of life of its inhabitants was high, and the country enjoyed great economic stability. During the 40s was where the first great social and commercial change in the country took place. With the arrival of Juan Domingo Perón to power, through a coup d'etat, and then being elected by popular vote, a love for the ideas of socialism by a sector of the Argentine population would start. Perón was a textbook populist. He created a cult of his person, which continues to this day. However, one of his greatest changes in Argentine history was to change the Constitution of 1853, which proclaimed the free market and private property, for a constitution of a more interventionist and socialist style on the part of the state in 1949. This had a great socio-economic impact on society and ended very badly with the army bombing Plaza de Mayo to overthrow Perón in 1955. For the next few decades, Argentina was a powder keg waiting to explode. Social and economic instability ate away at the country's foundations, heralding a bleak future. Cruel dictatorships, short-lived democratic governments, and the looming shadow of guerrillas painted a chaotic picture. The climax of this convulsion came in 1976 with the bloodiest and longest coup d'état in its history, leaving a deep scar on the nation. The Argentine military dictatorship, 1976 to 1983, marked a before and after in the country's history, leaving deep scars on society. Kidnappings, forced disappearances, and the war in the Malvinas are just some of the serious crimes committed during this period, which also generated a deep social and economic wound for the country. Despite the democratic recovery in 1983, Argentina faced great economic challenges. The hyperinflation of 1989 highlighted the fragility of the situation and the need for structural reforms. The 1990s, under the government of Carlos Menem, brought a period of economic stability and openness to the world, but also accentuated social inequalities and left a legacy of corruption. The decade closed with a new economic crisis, demonstrating that the country's structural problems had not yet been solved. In summary, in 70 years of history, with democratic governments and dictatorships in between, Argentina reached the new century as a ship adrift. Decades and decades of fiscal deficit, bad economic measures, and political and economic instability paid off. Argentina's problem is always the same. Its government collects more than it spends. And so it was that while the world was making its way towards new technologies and globalization, Argentina was going through one of its worst economic crises with a debt of $129.75 billion, which represented 40.83% of the gross domestic product, and with a poverty level of 40% and 13.6% of indigents among its population. The bomb was about to explode. And that day finally came. In December 2001, Argentina had to accept its reality. The government defaulted on its debt payments and fell into default. A bank run ensued, followed by a seizure of citizens' savings, and the country exploded. The people took to the streets with pots and pans, shouting, "They're all out of here." Flames all over the streets, looting and riots in every city. The country was on fire. The then president, Fernando de la Rúa, he decreed a state of siege and resigned from his position as president, leaving in an helicopter for fear of the people in the streets.
Por parte del entonces presidente del estado de sitio para asegurar la ley y el orden y terminar con los incidentes. Luego, el 20 de diciembre, con protestas, con violencia policial.
To give you an idea of what the situation was like in those days, Argentina had 5 presidents in just 1 week and 39 people killed by the repression of the riots. From 2003 to 2015, we will talk more in detail in another video. I can only tell you that in those years, and with the arrival of the Kirchner family to power, Argentina will experience the worst corruption and destruction of its economy in history. Do you want to see how it all ended? Here is the answer. And that's how we get to the beginning of this video. We go from 2014 onwards, and these are Javier's first interviews on TV. These are Javier's first TV interviews. To reach the presidency, he had to go through a very long way, and as every way, you start from the bottom. For these years, Argentina is extremely divided between Peronism and anti-Peronism. Peronism, now led by the Kirchner family, is now called Kirchnerism, and from now on, this is how we will refer to it when talking about Peronism. The opposition was always led by the Radical Civic Union Party, but over the years it also changed until it became a party called PRO. Led by engineer Mauricio Macri, the party is commonly known as Macrismo, and that is how we will refer to it from now on. In 2015, the Argentine people were fed up with Kirchnerism, and with the help of Mauricio Macri, Macrismo won the presidential elections. But Macrismo was not up to the task. The people had asked for a change, and Macri's government was more of the same. That is where the figure of Javier Milei emerges, a disruptive man who is not afraid to speak his mind, even if he is treated as crazy. Back then, Javier was nothing more than an ordinary guy. He gave economics classes at universities, wrote economics books, and provided advice to companies. It was then that on July 26, 2016, at 11 p.m., the host Alejandro Fantino, who was conducting a TV program, introduced Javier Milei as a guest, and from that day on, Javier's life was not the same. The program itself was not a very watched program. Its late schedule and its topics of conversation did not manage to take off the program from the 2 or 3 points of writing. However, that night the writing rose to 7 points. That man with tousled hair and a passionate way of speaking caught the attention of the viewers that night in July. But what no one knew or imagined was that this interview alone would be the beginning of the change that Argentine society was waiting for. And that's how we get to the end of this chapter, and believe me, the best is yet to come. If you don't want to miss a single chapter of this wonderful story, I invite you to subscribe to my channel. See you in Chapter 2.
¡La libertad avanza! ¡Viva la libertad, carajo! ¡Vamos!
La cancha.